الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Respected ulama, my elders, brothers and sisters, welcome to this third day of the Child Protection Seminar. We are almost going to get started, so please settle down. Please settle down so that we can begin. We will begin with the recitation of a few verses of the Holy Quran to get things started. We will request Brother Hilal to please come forward and grace us with a few verses of the Holy Quran.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Ahsantu. Assalamu alaikum once again. My name is Muhammad Manji and I will be facilitating this session today morning. As I said, this is day 3 of the Child Protection Seminar. We have some very interesting and engaging talks, followed by an even more interesting and engaging Q&A. We have a talk on child protection law in Tanzania by Brother Ali Hassan Kasam, and then we have understanding and addressing the adverse effects of childhood adversity. These will be the first 2 sessions. Just to bring things in context, and before I introduce the first speaker, so I'm a physician and I see adults mainly. 90% of my patients are adults. But this is a child protection seminar, and I'll tell you what my perspective is on the subject. Usually when kids fall sick, they go to a pediatrician, they go to a pediatric clinic, and they will be attending those clinics until they are at that age when they have now transitioned from childhood to adulthood, which is when they will transition over to me. So if someone is going to live their life for 80 years, it means that the pediatric part of it is maybe the first 20% or 30% or whatever will fall under pediatrics, and then after that it will be adulthood. So I usually, if I can say that, I inherit these patients to my clinic, and at that time when these patients transition from their pediatric providers to me, at that particular instance, the view I get is that if I see that this child has been brought up well, then I can see the good future and the service to the community that this young child who has now turned into an adult will provide for the remaining 60 years of his life. At the same time, I'm also situated at a good point, at a good vantage point, whereby if I see that this child has not had the upbringing that he has required, has not been protected well enough, you can at that point see the problems that will be a part of that child's life and perhaps as a result to others. Okay? So suffices to say that although this is a minority of the period, but it is so important for the remainder of their life. I will introduce the first speaker. We are talking about child protection law in Tanzania, and our first speaker is Advocate Ali Hassan Kasam. So Ali Hassan is a homegrown individual, born and raised in Dar es Salaam. He undertook his primary and secondary education in Dar es Salaam, and thereafter obtained his certificate in law with a distinction from the University of Dar es Salaam. Ali Hassan thereafter moved to the United Kingdom, where he undertook his Bachelor of Law, the prestigious LLB, and graduated with a first-class honors from University of Buckingham and was awarded for his outstanding achievement in the law of torts. During his time in the UK, Ali Hassan shadowed the case controller at the Serious Frauds Office. Ali Hassan moved back to Dar, which is so rare. Ali Hassan moved back to Dar in 2020, rare and admirable, where he worked as a legal intern and thereafter embarked on undertaking his postgraduate diploma in legal practice. Ali Hassan is a qualified lawyer and an advocate of the High Court of Tanzania and is also a solicitor candidate in the United Kingdom. Ali Hassan is actively involved in the community and is part of the Constitution Review Committee at the Jamaat, the Constitution Amendment Committee of Africa Federation, and provides legal counsel and advice to institutions within and outside the community. Ali Hassan, please, you are welcome, and please take us through your talk. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا وحفظا قويا وفهما كاملا وعقلا سالما برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Dear scholars, my elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My role is a bit different from what you've been hearing the last 2 days and today as well. My knowledge of Sharia and child psychology is very limited, but I will try and share as much as I can about child protection laws in Tanzania. It is an important topic, and we will understand why we are going to be discussing this important aspect, especially given the times that we are currently living through and the context of the discussion that is currently ongoing in this seminar. Without further ado, I'll move forward, and as you can see, this is the scope of discussion that we are trying to cover today. We'll have the legal framework, the laws that are going to be discussed about, especially in the context of what we are trying to achieve today, the brief history and necessity for this legal framework. We'll have a brief insight on why we need to protect our children. Well, who is considered as a child? Today we ask many questions. Is it someone under 10 years, under 12 years, is it under 15 years? Or is there a higher threshold for someone who is considered to be a child? And then we will look at the issues or the offenses or how the offenses against morality, especially against children, are covered under law. And then what follows if a potential crime has been committed? Can we legally expose the offenders? That is, I think, a big question. I believe, inshallah, Sheikh Al-Dina will cover that from a Sharia perspective. But it's important to know that the fact that we're living in this beautiful country, we need to know what the law says about us trying to expose those who are the perpetrators. And we will then look at a few challenges and the recommendations in practice and in law. And inshallah, we will end there, and then we'll see how the question answer session then moves forward. So, the legal framework. These are some of the laws that are covering child protection in Tanzania, or at least related to children. We have obviously the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania, followed by the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Child. We'll discuss more about that. We have the African Charter, we have the Law of the Child Act. I think that is one of the most important ones. We have the Penal Code, which is arguably the criminal handbook of this country. So all the crimes, the offenses related to the crimes, the penalties are all part of that particular act. And then we have the Criminal Procedure Act, we have Electronic and Postal Communications Act, We have the Whistleblower and Witness Protection Act. We'll discuss more about why this has been included in today's discussion. And obviously, we have the Sexual Offences Act, which has now been repealed and has been included in the Penal Code. So, a brief history and why we need this legal framework. So, a long time ago in the 70s and the 80s, there was a large and an outcry about why our children need to be protected. And this is not only in Tanzania, this is a global demand that came about. And so the United Nations set together and created this charter, which is the Convention of the Rights of Child, and it is in the history of the United Nations, the widely ratified. So the most of the countries have signed towards this treaty is to do with the children. And then as you all know, we have the Organization of the African Union, which then moved into becoming an African Union, also then created its own charter. So it's the African Charter Rights and Welfare of a Child. And then whilst this was there was a demand within Tanzania to now also actively work on protecting our children. We'll come to statistics a bit later, but you will realize why the country had to implement the Law of the Child Act. Tanzania ratified the United Nations Convention of Rights of Child a long time after it was drafted and put forward. And thereafter, in 2003, it is when the African Nations Charter was ratified by Tanzania. However, in 2009, after a large outcry, before that a commission was formed to look into child-related laws in Tanzania, and thereafter the Law of the Child Act was enacted. And currently, we have a lot of laws related to children that are covered in a broad spectrum of laws, and that is why we have a large legal framework, as you saw in slide number 2. However, Deshna Kanun, Aparnesu, you know what, we're not related. Why are we concerned with what the law of the country says? You know what, we just want to know what the Sharia says. We really have no interest in knowing what the law says. No, we live in this country. We need to know what the country, how the country protects our children, what are the provisions, in fact, or whenever we see that our child has been, or there's a potential for a child to be assaulted or abused, how this country protects us, what are the mechanisms. So it is important for us to understand why this is there, and there is a need and a necessity for this to be understood, for us to come here today and learn why the country and what the country has done to protect our children. So the question is, do we need to protect our children? If you look at the statistics, this is in 2009, the early statistics, at least it was 27.9 girls were assaulted sexually. And this is not a small number. And thereafter, in the middle, there was a bit of data collection. And then the Legal Human Rights Center decided to take statistics. And as you can see, these are quite alarming statistics at the end of the day, whereby over 5,000 child rape cases are being reported and 1,000 sodomy cases are being reported in this country. And when I say reported, these are only the ones that have been taken to the police or to the right government authority. The rest are unreported. So this is not a small number. At least 39 cases are being reported every single day in this country. And we might say, well, we're not affected. We are indeed affected. We all are, or potentially are surrounded by people who are predators in this case, and we are aware of this. We've discussed this for the last 2 days, and we'll be discussing this today as well. This is not something that we should say we should keep away from. This is a reality that we need to accept, and this is ratified data that the law has provided. So these are alarming figures, and also the survey says that this is not going to stop now. The numbers are rising, and they are trying to look at ways of how to limit those numbers, but the current data suggests that this data is going to increase, the numbers are going to increase, and now it is upon ourselves to now try and see, in accordance with the law, how we can protect our children. So, quickly jumping into the discussion of definition of a child. So, as I mentioned earlier, there is a bit of discussion about who is a child and what is a child and what is the age category of a child. So, in accordance to the law of the Child Act clearly says any person under the age of 18 years is regarded as a child. So the age of 10 and under, or 12 and under, or 15 and under in certain circumstances where you see ahead is that the penalties and the punishments are more severe for any offense that has been undertaken against a child of 10 or so years. But according to law, the child is categorized as under 18. Age of consent, again, is 18. And today, we all gather here and say, you know what, as I mentioned earlier, après tout, why are we here? Why does it concern us? Okay, my child is there, but we are safe. Or, we don't really need to know what the law says about protecting our children. No, the law imposes a duty upon the parents to protect the interest of a child. So today, by being here, are you abiding and adhering to the law? Yes, you are, because you are here, because you are interested in knowing how you can protect your child and what the law says. So yes, what you're here, why we are here, we are all, alhamdulillah, I think law-abiding citizens. And this is an important aspect because we need to know that today the law has required us. It is not that as if we're doing it out of our moral or natural duty towards our child. No, but it is an imposition by the law. So quickly, we'll move into the issues that are covered in the law. I know yesterday Professor Karim adequately covered this, and there were really sad and really graphic cases that I've come across as well. And some of these cases, I was telling my better half as well that I think I just need to stop now reading those cases because these were not really nice cases to look at. And some of them were to do with children less than 5 years. And I will try and talk about them later in this presentation. But when you see the reality, these are reported cases. These are cases that have gone to court, and decisions have been made about them. And so we will look into them in a bit, but we'll start off with the one that is the most obvious one, but also with the most strict penalty in accordance to the law, which is rape. So rape is covered under the Penal Code, as I mentioned, which is the Criminal Law Handbook. Rape in this country only applies from a male to a female. It doesn't apply the other way. It doesn't apply from a male towards a male. It is only male towards a female. So in rape, it is only covering, as I said, male to female. And the law has specifically provided for individuals in positions of authority, religious personnel, and teachers, and those who work in schools and daycare centers and hospitals. And that is, but one might ask, why is the law talking about all these individuals, and why teachers, and why hospital staff, and why management of madrasas? It is because these cases are coming, and if you go, we will discuss them again later on. You will see that some of the perpetrators are people who are, not some, majority are people that we know of. You will see their teachers, you will see their neighbors, close family members. These are the ones who are committing these offenses. So the law has clearly stipulated for these individuals, especially in this section of the Penal Code. And it is for girls under 18. So for example, this requires penetration. Even a slight bit of penetration is crucial to establish the element of rape. It is not important, or the law does not require any evidence of resistance or physical injuries to be manifested. However, for girls under 18, the law does not require a consent. Whether it is consensual or not, the law deems it irrelevant except where it is a case of marriage. Now, we all know the law of the Marriage Act has a child of 15 years is eligible to be married. Okay, so that is the current law. Obviously, there is reforms being looked at, and currently, I think there is also a discussion in the parliament around surrounding that. So, for now, this is what the law is, that the child of 15 years can get married. A girl, for a boy, it has to be 18 years. But in this case, in rape-related matters, anyone under the age of 18, a consent is deemed irrelevant, and the law will impose this offense if proven guilty. So we will look at specific cases, one being that of Festo Domitian versus the Republic. Now, in all cases, there's always going to be the prosecutor is the government, and when we refer to the government, we refer to the Republic. Now, in this case, the perpetrator, as provided in the slides, was a neighbor and someone who was very well known to the victims. And one fine night he decided, because he was very close proximity to the victims, he entered their house and raped 2 girls of aged 15 years and threatened them with a knife that if you then decide to tell anyone, then we will kill you. But thankfully, the girls did disclose them to their family, and the perpetrator was apprehended, and criminal institutions and legal proceedings were made against him, and he was proven guilty. But some of the cases that you go and see in rape is that after the perpetrator has raped the victim, he gives them 2,000 shillings, and this is written in the law, in the cases. He gives them 2,000 shillings and tells them, please do not tell anyone, not please, do not tell anyone, or else I will harm you and your family. In the other cases, as you can see, in the case of John Martin, he was a teacher, a temporary teacher who then decided to take advantage of his position, and he told the children that, can you help me look for those who are absent and are not coming to school? And when they went to help him, he raped them. And the last case that I want to present, there are thousands, but this is the last one, which is the person named Mathayo Molel. He raped 4 girls under 18 at an education center in a village where the children were living, and every single day he used to come there at night with the help of the guard. He used to bribe the guard and rape these children. It is until when the head of the village came to see the facilities of the education center, that's when they realized that this was happening, and this person was apprehended. But every single night, he was going there and raping children under the age of 10 or 12. The next offense that we have, okay, so this is the punishment. The perpetrators could face imprisonment for life or 30 years with corporal punishment, and the law is imposed a fine and court-ordered compensation. For offenders who are under 18, if it's your first offense, as you can see, it's corporal punishment. Second offense is imprisonment and corporal punishment. Yes, corporal punishment is part of the law. There's a whole act that is governing corporal punishments in Tanzania. And for rape of girls under 18, it is mandatory life imprisonment. So for those, inshallah, this there is not there in our community, but those perpetrators who are actually even considering this, within and outside the community, the law is very harsh on the punishments. And attempted rape, this is where someone tries to engage into prohibited sexual intercourse with a female against her will. It encompasses various scenarios, such as threats, the use of violence and influence, making false representations saying that, okay, I have consented, I can marry you, and even pretending, as I say, to be the victim's spouse. In the case of Dominion Ruhele versus the Republic, the perpetrator was attempting to rape her, and when she screamed is when the neighbors came to help, and that's when he was apprehended and was convicted of attempted rape. And the consequences, again, imprisonment for life depending on the severity of the offense. And the more someone tries to repeat this offense, the harsher the punishment becomes. And again, corporal punishment is also part of attempted rape. We'll now move on to, again, this is the punishment. We have sexual assault. This has also been covered, and I think yesterday, Professor Karim mentioned as well, sexual assault is also covered under law, and this is where someone tries to make words or making gestures towards, or trying to exhibit objects towards a female, and this is also to try and cause annoyance to the victim. This is also a crime under law, and the offender can face imprisonment of up to 5 years, or a fine as well, or both. So even those gestures that we can see someone making towards the opposite gender, which can be deemed to be sexual, is an offense under the law. Sexual exploitation of children, which is, I believe, arguably the focus of our discussion today. It is a crucial topic, and the law covers it under Section 138B of the Penal Code. This involves permitting abuse to procuring a child for sexual activities. The punishment is severe. It can be from 15 to 30 years, or sometimes even the court can impose a higher fine depending on the offense that has been undertaken. For example, in this case of Job Lama and others versus the Republic, the perpetrators used violence against the victim. They forced her to come with them as she was walking back from school, and there were a few of them. And they forced her to have sexual intercourse with a dog. And when you read the judgment of the judge, and he said that this is one of the most inhumane crimes that even he has come across. But this is the reality that we are living with within the jurisdiction of this country. We hope that such instances do not happen within the community, but this is a reality, and that is why the law has adequately covered for this. As I mentioned, the punishment is about 15 to 30 years, and with or without a fine and a compensation to the victim. We have indecent assault, again covered by law. This is where indecent assault is on boys under the age of 18. In this case, the offenders could face imprisonment for life, emphasizing the gravity of offenses such as child sexual abuse. In this case, is a case of Shani versus the Republic. The perpetrator was a female who was an elderly within the 30s and the 40s who used to try and take advantage of this young boy under the age of 18. Every day, when he used to come back from school or when his parents are not around, she used to take him with him and try and, she used to rape him. Rape doesn't apply from a female to male, but then she used to assault him sexually. And she used to try and, when indecent assault in law, one of the instances has been covered is that the perpetrator tries to or plays around with the private parts of the victim. That is when indecent assault is charged upon them. So this is one of the instances where a female of the age 30 to 40 years old was taking advantage of a boy who was 14 or 13 years old. Now, one of the key discussions that we had yesterday with Sheikh Sekaleshwar was to do with the LGBTQ movement that is currently ongoing around the world, and quite vibrant so. And there is a lot of questions surrounding the applicability and whether Tanzania is condemning it or condoning it, and are there more measures to make it harsher in the future or not. So Tanzania does not explicitly use the terms LGBTQ. So there's no use of the terms lesbian or gay, for example, and it is only talking of and categorized as unnatural offense. So in law, when you see unnatural offense covered under the Penal Code section 154 and 155, unnatural offenses are those that cover homosexuality in the country. And the use of the term is carnal knowledge, which is derived from a Latin term. And in this case of Paul Dionis versus the Republic, the court simply says carnal knowledge means sexual intercourse. So where it's a male to a male or a male to a young boy as well, that is deemed to be under this category of unnatural offenses. And this involves, unnatural offenses involved with the order of the nature. So for example, when obviously in Tanzania this is regarded, and I believe worldwide as well, in some areas it's regarded that this is against the order of nature. Homosexuality is against the order of nature. So this is how the court has or the laws have interpreted it, and says that against the order of the nature involves homosexuality. Not only that, including sexual acts with animals is also included in this. And if found guilty, the offenders could face imprisonment for life or a minimum of 30 years. And if it is done against a child, then it is life imprisonment. In this case of Abdallah Kondo, this man had carnal knowledge and undertook sexual intercourse with a child of 3 years. It is when the child started crying and people could hear him, that's when they realized that this is happening, and they went and apprehended the perpetrator. So one can see how a child of 3 years is not even spared from this heinous act and a heinous crime, and we need to be more vigilant and aware of our surroundings. And again, the perpetrators are people from around the area. They are neighbors, they're well-known people. They're people that are close family members as well, who went and undertook this crime against this 3-year-old boy. So now, we will continue with the issues of homosexuality. And when you look at the law, and when you read the cases, I'm happy to provide references to these cases as well, you will realize that it is not only from a person of over 18 to under 18. There is perpetrators who are under the 18 years of age, who are known to the victims, who are pretending to be close to the victims and have decided to undertake carnal knowledge or have sexual intercourse with another boy, taking advantage and abusing their authority. At the same time, the law has not only criminalized sexual activities between a person of over 18 and under 18, but even over 18 of male between themselves, including having indecent behavior among themselves. So the law has adequately covered for homosexuality for those who are really concerned, and we'll discuss more about that as well in our future slides. We're not a long way to go. Inshallah, we'll complete before the 40 minutes time limit that I've been given. There are also other sexual offenses that have been covered, especially against children. There is cruelty against children. So any person who has custody of a child, or who is charge of a child, not only custody of a child, but even is undertaken to take care of a child, if he treats, neglects, or abandons a child, it is a crime under law. So we have to be careful of that as well. And there are instances whereby we've seen that child carers have been seen to be treating our children, or any children rather, very inhumanely. There are those who are also making sexual advances towards children. The law has made this a crime, and the thing that we will see in recommendations of what our role should be when we see any crime is about to be committed or to be committed. There are also instances of gang rape. We've seen gang rape also happening in the country, and there are instances of someone or a few group of 3 or 4 people who decided to take advantage of an 11-year-old girl as well. And again, they threatened her with violence, that if you decide to go and report this matter, we will kill you and we will harm your family as well. There are issues, again, related to female genital mutilation. I think Professor Kareem has covered this yesterday as well. It is a crime in this country and adequately covered under law. So these are some of the offenses and the crimes that we can see that the law has covered in relation to children. Now, for example, rape is also covering females and over the age of 18, but the context of this discussion is children, so we will discuss only those offenses and laws that are related to our children. So, if I believe, or if an alleged crime has been committed, what is next? Unfortunately, we are living in this bubble that says, no, let us not go to the police. Aapko family un naam kharab tha se. Or, you know what, we will try and the dignity of our family will go down when people find out what has happened to one of our own. And that is the biggest mistake we can do. Because when the victim remains silent, when the family remains silent, the perpetrators remain silent and get away again and again and again. So, when such an offense or a potential crime has been committed, what do? Initiate criminal proceedings is what the law has required to do. So, visit the nearest police post, file a complaint, provide a statement, and thereafter there's a whole proceeding. So they'll take your statement and any evidence that you have at that point in time. The law then will require the police to go after the perpetrator, arrest him, his statement will be taken, and thereafter proceedings will continue. However, we must realize that the law in the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania has clearly said that there is a presumption of innocence. Every person is innocent until proven guilty. Not proven by social media, not proven by friends and family, proven by the courts of this country. So let us not try and take law into our own hands. We have a system in place, use the system. So, the big question, and rightfully the right question, can we expose offenders? Now, this is widely covered in the law, especially the Electronic and Postal Communications Act and its regulations that says individuals are prohibited from publishing certain content, and that content involves information that may be true or not about an individual. Also, let the courts make the decision of who is a criminal and who is not, whether that particular act was a crime or not. Now, we may have questions and comments about the court procedures and the court systems in Tanzania, but we have adequate court especially when it comes to criminal cases. So let them be the ones to decide. Let us not be the victims and the jury and the judge as well. Let them decide, but in short, we're not allowed to defame someone, obviously, because that will obviously open up to defamation proceedings as well if that allegation is ended up being untrue. So whenever it is important that the victim is protected, and at that point in time where the perpetrator has not been convicted, even he is not allowed to be discussed or lambasted on social media. That's what we do. We send images, we send messages, and say that this is one has done this, without realizing that that person can open up defamation proceedings in civil court against you if that allegation is proven to be untrue. Also, the electronic content regulation says even if the information may be true, you are prohibited from publicizing such content. So we have to be very vigilant of what we start publicizing on social media. Not only social media, but when we say defamation, it can mean to any third person. So our barazas, our gatherings need to be very careful that we do not discuss such things until the courts have proven guilty. Even then, we have to try and avoid, because we need to try and protect the victim. If the courts or the law are trying to protect the victim, they do not use the names of the victim, then who are we to now try and publicize who the victim is? We have the legal landscape now. So, what happens next? Is the law going to effectively cover LGBTQ, or has it adequately covered? The law has adequately covered, as I mentioned, under unnatural offenses. Yes, one of the challenges that we will see ahead is that the law does not specifically use the terms lesbian or gay, or the terms that we are all accustomed to, but rather the law uses terms such as unnatural offenses. Now, the Parliament has been actively discussing this, and I will just quote this from the Member of Parliament, Mr. Festo Sanga says, and I quote, "It is neither our morals nor our values. Our holy books, the Quran and the Bible, both reject it meaning the acts of homosexuality. We need to protect our children, because if we fail now, then we are going to have gay leaders." That's what he says. And we may seem to be amused by it, but we've seen this happening around the world. And Tanzania, yes, Uganda has taken active measures, but Tanzania has also decided to now take active measures to try and make more harsher punishments for those who are committing such heinous acts. Now, challenges and recommendations. We do realize that, as I mentioned earlier, the law does not specifically use the terms of homosexuality or the terms that we are accustomed to. So that is one of the challenges that we can foresee, and maybe in the law reform, the law might look at making such explicit and specific language. However, case law has clearly said that unnatural offenses includes those nature of homosexuality. Now, one of the most important recommendations that I can give to our community and our leaders as well, is to implement whistleblower policies. Who is a whistleblower? Someone who is here to disclose wrongdoing or a potential crime that is about to be committed. So if a crime has been committed or is about to be committed, a whistleblower who is aware of that is legally recognized under law. Now, because we are a private institution, I highly urge that our schools, our madrasas, even our community, especially when we're looking at volunteers, in our volunteers hierarchy to implement this. So for example, if I know of someone who is about to, God forbid, rape someone else, or is about to, God forbid, take advantage of a younger boy and maybe sexually abuse him, I then have the duty to go and report this to an authority that, for example, the Jamaat establishes. So for example, if we have the Jamaat establishing an authority of, let's say, morals and discipline, and that is the competent authority within the Jamaat to regulate such matters, or for example, I would go to the president and say, look, this is happening. The president is then duty-bound to undertake investigations, and when this is proven to be true, and also with the help of the police, then the president is also required to then report this matter to the police, and criminal proceedings will have to be initiated against that person. So sometimes we are all scared to go out of the bubble and say, but what if I'm exposed that I'm the one who went, and we use the term snitched. So if we snitch against that person, what happens? The law requires us to protect that particular whistleblower. So if I am the whistleblower and I go and say that this crime has been committed or is going to be committed, the law requires that, for example, the president to protect my identity. In that way, I think we can try, this is one of the biggest strengths I believe that we can try and use to focus and prevent or minimize crimes, especially offenses within our community. We know that this is existential in our community, but if we encourage people to take up the role of a whistleblower, and if we establish a good competent authority and the mechanisms accordingly, I'm sure that this crime can be minimized as much as we can in this community. My last recommendation is, last but one recommendation is, I don't know if anyone has heard of DBS, which is Disclosure and Bearing Services in the United Kingdom. So for example, I will try and wrap this up within the next 2 or so minutes. If someone intends to become an FA coaching license, if one wants to become a coach, a football coach in the United Kingdom, you need to undertake a DBS check. A DBS check is someone who is in close proximity, just like teachers, with children. They are required to undertake a DBS check. Now, the law of Tanzania does not impose this, but we can, within our community institutions, establish that. So this is a checklist, including a police clearance, which I'm sure is being happening right now. But that DBS is a comprehensive checklist, whereby that checklist will determine whether you are fit to be making interactions with children or not. We have many instances. We have madrasas, we have schools, we have volunteers, we have sports, we have many institutions within our community that deal directly with children. So if we can implement something like a DBS check for these children, maybe we can try and minimize those potential perpetrators who are maybe going to endanger our children. And as I mentioned, use the law, do not abuse the law. It is crucial to utilize the legal processes I mentioned earlier to ensure that justice is served without compromising the rights of individuals. Whenever a criminal proceeding is ongoing, for those of you who've watched Lincoln Lawyer, and you might have realized where the lawyer tells that the accused that, why are you doing this podcast in the middle of the proceedings? Because this can create issues for the case, for the prosecution, for the victim. So let us not try and be the ones to decide the case on behalf of the judge. The judge and the courts are competent enough. Let us not take law into our own hands and try and say, you know what, I just say, you know what, he has done this to my child, I am going to do this. I know it is difficult, it creates a lot of anger, a lot of emotion when someone does this to one of our own, but let us be cognizant that there is a law in place. There are mechanisms in the law to deal with such offenders. Let us not take law into our own hands. With that, I think this is the last verse that I believe is important for all of us to leave with, which says, in Surah Nisa, verse 135, O believers, stand firm for justice as witness for Allah, even if it is against your own selves or your parents or close relatives. Be they rich or poor, Allah is best to ensure their interests, so do not let your desires cause you to deviate from justice. If you distort the testimony or refuse to give it to them, then know Allah is certainly all aware of what you do. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, but this is the reality, the offenders are around us, the people that we probably trust the most, the people that we believe cannot do such actions, are the ones that are probably the ones that we need to be the most careful of. And if we are aware of who they are, and we are aware that these people are doing such actions, and we have proof for this, then we are duty-bound, not only according to law, but the Quran as well says, be it your friend or your family, you are duty-bound to disclose this. And I believe if we can establish the whistleblower policy within our community, then you can report this matter to the competent authority, and they will then take it up among themselves. I hope I have not exceeded my time. With that, inshallah, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can within the time frame that we have. But thank you very much for listening. I know for some law is boring, but it is an important part of our lives, and we live by the law and in adherence to the law. So let us implement this, and inshallah, we are all going to minimize these offenses and heinous acts within our community as much as we can, and inshallah, by extension, to our country too. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Ali Hassan. That was by no means boring. It was absolutely enlightening. absolutely enlightening. I think I have learned so much. The statistics that you presented and the way that these things have been laid out in the court, sometimes one way of addressing an issue will be to bembeleza it, but sometimes one way of addressing an issue would be to show them the stick. We will now go on to the second session that we are talking about understanding and addressing the effects of childhood adversity. So we know that whatever happens in childhood can matter for a lifetime. To take us through this session, we have Sister Farzana Karawali. She is going to speak to us about this. She is a learning disabilities nurse. She's a social worker. She's a student of neuroscience and psychology of mental health, a holistic therapeutic life coach. She's done addiction counseling. She's a professional trainer and consultant in health and social care. She's an adult learning educator and really an expert in the subject. So, Sister Farzana, please, karibu.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Before I start, I just want to say thank you so much. I've been doing the training, and obviously I don't know the law here, so I've only been able to use the British law as an equivalent. So I think that's really refreshing to know, and I'm sure all the participants who are asking, you know, their questions are answered. So no, it wasn't boring. It was excellent, amazing. Thank you. So I want to first say thank you so much to the Jamaat for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's honestly an absolute privilege, and the opportunity to share the burden and the pain of all the people that I have supported over the years, whose voice has never been out in the open. So I thank you for being the first Jamaat out of our many Jamaats, and inshallah many more to come, that have started this conversation. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it's such a relief to be here, honestly. Thank you. So I just want to first tell you that what I'm going to go through is going to be a bit of a roundup of some of the things that we've already spoken about or heard today from our absolutely amazing speakers. And it's just kind of going to join it all together. So it's a journey. It's a journey that a child goes through when they have adversity, okay? And the two kind of studies that I have drawn a lot of this from because of the work I've done within university and the dissertation that I just submitted was ACES, a childhood adversity study, which is a longitudinal study over many years, looking at, you know, how adversity impacts the adults as they get older, and Sister Barak also referred to it, and I think some other people had also referred to it. And I'm also using the English and Romanian adoptee study because of the level of adversity experienced. It was then drawn out as an equivalent in the UK with UK adoptees from Romania. So it's looking at adversity in children, and a lot of what I will be sharing is coming from there as well, which is very relevant to us. So Bismillah. So can we, sorry, I was going to say move to the first slide, but I have it here. Okay, it's moved to a few, okay. So when a child is born, okay, the child has no understanding of the world, no experience of the world at all. And this child sees what the mother and the father is doing. They smile, so the child smiles back. The child is kind of trying to figure out what is this smile? And as they see the smile, and it automatically happens with us, if somebody smiles, we end up smiling back even if we've had the worst day. It's an automatic reaction. That reaction, the child is using as a stimulus. They're realizing that, you know, my reactions change in accordance with my parents' reaction. And this exchange continues to happen with other things. And an awareness starts to build up. In that awareness, their behaviors start. Now, we've used behaviors as a negative thing. I'm using behaviors as a reaction, as a, you know, contribution to society. So that smile is a behavior. So these behaviors start to show up within the child, and that's an interaction. Yes, behaviors are a level of interaction, a level of communication, because they can't speak. Then they start to conceptualize what's going on. So the thought processes start, okay? I'm understanding that clearly this is a positive thing. They didn't know what positive and negative was. My parents are smiling at me. That's positive, that's nice. It feels good within me. So there's sensory stimulation internally and sensory stimulation externally, okay? And in all of this, an environment is created around the child, okay? So the child is in this environment of positivity. And that is having an impact with the genetic system. The genes are influenced by the environment that's external, yes? So just imagine the impact. It's right within our genes, what we experience. And this experience is coded, decoded, and is read by the body, okay? So everything that we do and everything that we experience has an impact. Let's move on to the brain. A bit of neuroscience. I'm not going to bore you. It's really easy pictures. I want you to realize that when the brain is formed, okay, when the child is born, like our doctor, I've forgotten your name, sorry. When doctor had said, you know, the brain is formed, it's 90-something% formed, okay? So I'm not going to give you statistics. It's formed from the brainstem all the way through to the front, but the frontal part is never fully formed until the age of 25. So when we see that our children are not quite getting it, you know, they're not totally rationalizing as an adult, they're not understanding, it's because their brain is not fully formed until the age of 25, and we have to bear that in mind, okay? And when they are born, the work hasn't stopped. It's just the structure of the brain that's formed, right? The internal connections that you see in the middle picture are still forming. The neurological connections within the brain are still forming. The detail, because our brain has many crevices, they're not all yet filled and complete, and they're still forming. The child has not fully formed in their mind, in their brain, okay? So we need to bear all of this in mind in some of the things that we've heard. Then comes stress, and a lot of stress can happen to a child that we don't even realize, okay? And so in the next diagram you will see, I'm going the wrong way, okay? Everyone's heard of cortisol? Yeah? It's kind of like a buzzword that goes around, yeah? Okay. So cortisol is produced as a response mechanism to stress, okay? So when there's lots of stress, cortisol levels within the brain, within the limbic system is released, and particularly obviously with all the abuse, you can imagine how much cortisol is released in the brain. It then has an impact on the body, and I will go into that later. And my picture where I've drawn a little blue squiggle is trying to represent the limbic system, and that's the system that deals with the memory and emotion and things like that. I'm not going to go into detail of neuroscience, but I just want to contextualize that we've spoken about a lot of things, but we're not realizing the detailed impact within the child, in that child's body, in that child's brain that's being experienced. And obviously you can see on the slides, I think you'll all get a copy of the slides, so I'll leave you to read that. Okay? So we've also been told in a lot of the talks today that a child, their job is not to learn when they're very young, and we do put them through the pressure of learning, okay? So they're not there for higher cognitive functions. They need to learn through exploring, through experimenting, just like the baby, when the baby was born, learned so much about their relationship with their caregiver, learned so much about how to communicate with their caregiver without words. Yep, and also internalized, all by themselves, just through exploring and experimenting and kicking and moving their hands. Yes? So there is so much that a child can learn from their environment without even being told. And we need to give them space to explore and be who they are. Then they will know their potential. Because we ask our teenagers when they're getting to GCSE, Haya, what do you want to be? Sukaruchedane. You have no idea? Maybe it's because we never gave them the chance to explore their potential. Maybe we forced them down an avenue, and we've heard that in other talks as well. So we need to think about that. We need to give them safe spaces, okay? And if we are pushing them, we're putting them through that, the issue with hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, all of that, which is having a very toxic effect on the child. And I'll hold my hands up, you know, all parents and myself have put our children through stress at some point. And some stress is good, and we'll talk about that as well. So it's not about not allowing the child any stress at all. When we think about our holy household, they had allowed space for the whole family to explore stress together. Their life was not free of stress. Their life was not free of adversity. Their adversity was at a next level that we can't even imagine. But it was shared, it was communicated, it was not hidden. And as a family, they dealt with things together, and that's where we are failing. Yeah? And as a community, they dealt with things together. Again, that's where we are failing. So let's go to the adversity side of things, okay? What kind of, so we're talking about the environment. What kind of environmental experiences are our children seeing? They're seeing parental discourse, issues between husband and wife in the home, okay? They're seeing domestic abuse, and even if they're not seeing it, it's behind closed doors. We don't even let them know what's happening. You're telling me that our home environments do not change if there's domestic abuse happening? You can feel it in the environment, yes or no? We can feel when it's Muharram and it's a time of sadness. We can feel, our bodies tell us, not our brain, not even the calendar will tell us. Our bodies will tell us it's Ramadan and it's a spiritual time, yes or no? So within a household where domestic abuse is happening, even if the child is not being told, not seen anything, they will be fully aware in their body. That's why I showed you the brain, and I will talk about the effects on the body. Separation and divorce, and I'm not saying separation and divorce should not happen. In fact, if there's a situation where the children are suffering, yes, we say to the wife sometimes, Sahan kar jarak, go back, try again, it's fine. Okay, if she's on her own. But if she has children, you are repeating that adversity to the next generation through epigenetics. That is going in the genetics of that child, and it is going to transfer to the next and the next and the next. And that's why we're here today with so much pain and difficulty, and we're unable to shift it because we have never addressed it. So, where divorce and separation needs to happen, it must happen. And the children should be paramount in that equation, not what the husband thinks and what the wife thinks. And if there is abuse, I'm sorry, the children should not be allowed to be in that environment. Fine, separate them for a few months, for a year. And if both have rehabilitated, get them back together as a family. We do not want to split families, and we do not want children to be away from both parents. We want that. So what we should be doing is rehabilitating and facilitating our families, not creating fitna, but we call the other side fitna. We call it fitna when one member calls out, I need help. Yes or no? Yes or no? Am I getting a yes from anyone? Am I wrong? No. Loss and grief also creates instability and stress within the home. But that's a space where we share with our children, don't we? Sometimes we tell our children, "Kai wandone, taru kam nati, I'll deal with it myself, it's my pain." But it shows. The parent has gone through grief, and it shows. And if we are supportive to that family that has gone through grief, the impact will not transfer to the children. Again, what are we doing as a community? We go till 40 days, and after that we go. Do you know when the grief sets in? Between 40 days and 1 year. And I have been grieved many times. And I can tell you, that's the time up until the 1 year where that pain will not shift. So we as a community need to be together because the children are affected, okay? And we forget them. Not getting attention that they needed, that happens obviously if there's adversity in the home, okay? Not having structure within a family setting. You know, if it's all mayhem, there's too much going on. And where are we as facilitators, as the community, to financially support where there's, you know, upheaval within the home? In whichever way we can, we must support. Thank you, thanks. Okay, so we're getting an understanding of the environmental experiences. There's a whole list on there, and I'll leave that for you. So what do we need to do? We need to stop the violence first. Yeah, we must stop the violence. When we look at domestic abuse, okay, it's a very high risk that the child may also be a perpetrator of abuse if they've been in an abusive household. And yes, we do see that in many cases. And there's also a chance that they will be victims of abuse, okay? So the abuse has to stop. In that generation, let's not let it spread anymore. Today, or these 3 days, have given us so much that we can stop it. We can stop our next generation from being infected with the same infections that our generation and before have been going through. So I've been working as a social worker and a nurse with many families. I have held hands with girls that have been raped by family members, including stepfathers, and I'm the voice for them today. For daughter-in-laws that have been raped by their father-in-laws. Yes? And what happens to the children? Just remember that. What happens to the children in that environment? What is the state of the mother when she's been raped by a father-in-law and she can't say anything? Because if she does, she loses her husband. She loses her children. Because unfortunately, we're in a world here where there's power on one side more than the other. I'm sorry to say, and we need to really reflect on that, okay? So we need to think about that, because in this again, yes, there is a victim, which is the wife of the daughter-in-law of the family who is being sexually abused, but the children are also the victims here. So if we want to look at justice, it must come from looking at the children and what they're going through, yeah? And then looking at the victim, and then looking at the rest. There's a family of 8. Let me also say that I've also worked with a girl with Down syndrome that has been domestically abused, but also she has also been raped by a stranger from the community. Okay? I've been, as an appropriate adult, holding hands with these people and supporting them through their tests for DNA. Have we ever thought about what they have to go through as a victim? They have to lie down, and after all that's been happened to their bodies, they now have to be checked and have internal tests and this test and that test and all. It doesn't end. And God forbid they get an infection. So we must think about that. So I've also worked with a family of 8 children, yeah, who are neglected. So neglect is also an issue. And because those children never seen the world in terms of they didn't understand what the world was like, their abuse was something that they were used to and they missed, which is amazing. It's the way they were cocooned. They were so blinded that they still loved their parents dearly. And to separate that family of 8 from the parents, who we could see were having such a detrimental impact on their children, was painful for us, but we had to do that. And sometimes these things have to be done. So again, children should be at the forefront. When we look at the impact of adversity and the environment on the children, we need to understand the dose effect. Okay, so dose effect is the duration of the abuse or the adversity that the child is experiencing, or the adult, if they're vulnerable, and the intensity. Yeah? And I think when we are looking at our cases, we must think about the dose effect, the duration this abuse has gone on for, and the intensity that the abuse has gone on for. In any cases, for adults, for children, always think about the dose effect. It's very helpful in helping us to understand the level, because not all abuse is at the same level, and so we can't brush them all the same way. Okay? Unfortunately, as I was saying, the brain is still developing, and the two studies that I've discussed about will show you evidence for this. Neurodevelopmental disorders, which we can see are on the rise, okay, are very much linked to the adversity that's happening. There's still research going on, and inshallah, if I get funding for the research proposal I've just submitted before I left, then I also too will try and be part of a research that will look at neurodevelopmental issues and adversity. So I'll ask you all to pray that inshallah I can get the funding for this and I can take that forward, and inshallah try and make some level of difference with King's College University. So when we look at what we're seeing, and I've seen this firsthand, which is why I want to do this, in many of the cases that I worked with, when a child has been in a home, an environment where there's been domestic abuse, I have seen high rates of ADHD, and again, these studies are also showing this, and high rates of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autistic spectrum disorder, the two disorders, okay? Or I'm seeing a co-occurrence of mixed signs. I'm seeing more of that, and still that's being researched. What is this? The co-occurrence of mixed signs of these two neurodevelopmental disorders. What's triggering them? And it's coming down to the environment. So let's realize that what I was saying at the beginning, the environmental impact, we need to be very much aware, okay? Neglect. When a child is neglected, they don't feel there's any reason to live. What's their use? What are they here for? These are the kind of thoughts and questions that come up in their mind. And that is a form of abuse. Neglecting your child is a form of abuse. When a parent is trying to support their child that's being neglected by other members of the family, there needs to be some understanding there. We need to find a way, because it can be that there are particular members of the family that are neglecting the child. It could be a grandparent, yes, that has never given that child attention, but every other child in the family is getting the attention. There's an environment created, that's adversity and stress on the child. But what's the use of me being in this family? Yeah, we are turning away our kids in situations like this. So I just want you to think about neglect. And if we are feeling that there are issues within our lives, we will feel that we won't feel complete. Yes, we feel gaps. And I'm very sure that each and every one of us has gone through something in our life, okay? Because life is just that way, unfortunately, where we have some level of gap within ourselves. Some of us have worked through these issues, and some of us haven't. And unfortunately, when we don't, we end up looking elsewhere to hide that pain, either spiritually, or through substances, or through shopping, gambling, all kinds of things. So when we say that our children are using substances because there's a buzz about it, because they're enjoying it, because I know the cases that I've worked with as a social worker, and I'm telling you, it's because there's a lack within them. And if us as parents and as adults in our families have not worked on ourselves and healed our own lack within us, and have not worked on personal development, we cannot understand what our child is going through. And that's the disconnect we're seeing in our families. We're not understanding our children. Sometimes when we hear our children, it becomes a trigger and a threat to ourselves because it triggers us to something that went on in our childhood that we haven't dealt with. So what do? We shut them up. Somehow, we shut them up because it becomes too much for us to handle. So where do they go? They go to substances, unfortunately. So substance abuse, please don't take it lightly. It's because they need support from something. Yes, peer pressure, but if the children had the right values which we don't even look at sometimes, have we stopped to look at what our values are? Or is it the values our parents gave us? Or the values our in-laws gave us when we move in? We are living our lives according to other people's values, but have not chosen values that we stand by throughout our life. We pick and choose them like masks and put them on and off depending on which environment we're going to. That's not values. So we must look at values and teach our children values so that they are strong in their belief. Wherever they go, they are shielded and equipped. Yes? So we need to think about that. Now, just want to go to the Vietnam War, okay? And I'm not sure if we already covered it here, I can't remember. But when the troops were at the Vietnam War, yes, they had lots of drugs available to them. They were using drugs. But when they came back home, only 20% of them were still addicted. And there are many studies like that that prove that substance abuse is not an addiction. It becomes a need because of the pain that they're experiencing. So what's at the root cause of this? It's the pain that's happening within our communities that we need to work on. There's also areas around instant gratification. We want things now. We cannot wait. Counseling is going to take too long. I'll go and buy, and I know we over here you have a lot more over-the-counter medication, and so we medicate ourselves, we numb ourselves. What we're not realizing is we're doing that as a parent, but there is an impact on the child, because if we haven't healed, the environment that we created for the children is toxic for them, because they're feeding off what we are exhaling in some ways. Another thing about the feel-good factor is that we're taking it to another level in terms of we go out for dinner with our children and our families, but we're not going out for dinner to spend time with them, talk to them, open up conversation, understand what they're going through, because it's tiring for us because we've gone through enough ourselves. So we can't connect with our children. We go there to take a breather and get the stimulation from the food, the smells, the people. So I'm going to say, go back to your intentions about everything that you do. In our religion, we've been told you have a niyyah for everything. So let's really start homing in on our niyyah, okay? Why are we doing what we are doing? Is it just to make us feel good in the short term? What's the impact of that? What's another way that I can do it for the sake of Allah? And so you're not going to go to a restaurant to eat and chill for the sake of Allah. You're going to have a bit of a reason for it, right? Self-satisfaction, I don't think that's been covered so far. So in terms of sexual satisfaction, okay? And that is happening within our communities, even within women. Yeah? And we need to realize that, and we need to think about, why is that happening? Have they been abused before? Is there something in terms of stimulation that we need to consider? How old are these people? How old are these children? I'm not here to give you a solution. I'm here to just bring about awareness. And I have had many cases from all over the world, okay? But another thing I want to bring up is that we are not doing justice. Sorry, I'm forgetting about the slides. We're not doing justice to our vulnerable people in the community that have learning disabilities, that have needs. They have the same makeup, body makeup, and hormonal makeup as we do. And so they have the same needs. Why are we not including them in matchmaking? Why are not we facilitating them and supporting them as a community to be a couple, to have a married life? And they're capable of doing that because I have worked with families together to allow their 2 children that have a learning disability to have a home from the local authority, but I'm sure as a community we can put money together and invest in something where we can house our people that are vulnerable and have carers going in to support them to have healthy marital relationships instead of self-satisfying. We don't even give our vulnerable children sex education because they look at kava parse, but you look at karse. That's not true. Their body is still going to tell them that there's a desire there. Remember I spoke about internal stimulation? It's still there. Even if you don't tell them, their body will tell them there is a need. And if we don't know, they will be satisfying themselves in any way possible, just like an itch on our hand. We need to start, have we still got time? Yeah, okay. So when you look back, I thought, let me check. We need to now think about how we're going to hold parent and child relationships, because I'm sorry, they're broken. They are very much broken. And it is harder work right now to work with our children. It's not as simple as it used to be. Our children want to explore, which is beautiful, because like I said, that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to allow our children to explore, to understand the world, to identify the dangers, and identify what's safe themselves, so that when it comes to drugs and things like that, they know, this doesn't seem right. When I was a kid, this didn't seem right. But if it's something that's come new to them, anything new is exciting, right? Yeah? So we must allow our children to explore. But in that, yes, it makes it difficult for us. But it's our responsibility to take time out, to develop a relationship with our children, to meet their emotional needs, which is the one thing that's neglected the most. It's the one thing that's neglected the most, their emotional needs. We will feed them, we will clothe them, we will house them, we will get them married. If those emotional needs are not met when they go into their marriage, you've just repeated that cycle. And then you'll say to them, so why is my grandchild like this? I raised you well. You did everything you could, but you didn't stop to give me time. You didn't stop to understand. You didn't stop to feel what I was going through. And you know why? Because you as a parent had blocked your pain. You were told, keep it quiet. There was a 2020 Dubai sessions that were happening, and one of the speakers there said that their family member had said, when you get married, whatever issues you have, lock them in a pressure cooker and keep it there. Unfortunately, that pressure cooker, if it doesn't explode in your lifetime, will explode in your child's lifetime. So please keep that in mind. Work with the pain that you have. Don't go to the counter and get antidepressants, okay? Make sure you work with that pain. So we need to work with our children. We need to make sure that they don't experience any more stress. We need to be there, not just spiritually. You must do this, you must do that. They won't connect. If their emotions are all over the place, will there be any way that they can get through that fog to connect spiritually? Be honest. When we are having a really hard time and we stand on that musalla, come on, we want to connect, we try to connect, we say our du'as, but there's so much baggage there that we should have cleared before we stepped on that musalla so that we can connect. Yes or no? Yes? So then, the same applies in family life. Clear the baggage. Don't hand it to the next generation. Clear it now. Yes? Because that's having the adverse effects on our children, and we are not protecting our children then. We're suffocating them. And the life cycle, like I said, it continues. It will continue, it won't stop. So let's quickly go to physiology, okay, and how it comes out in the body. So if we think of the body as teamwork between different organs, okay? All the organs here are working together. They're a team, okay? But the brain is the powerhouse, yeah? The brain is the one that is organizing them all, giving them signals and telling them what to do, okay? So, when there is stress in the brain, what does the brain do? The brain is trying to heal, yeah? And we've got to think about that and implement that in our lives. The brain is trying to heal. So the brain is detecting the stress and it passes the signals down the body to the cardiovascular system and tells the cardiovascular system, increase your blood pressure now. It needs to happen now, yeah? It's working well together. Then that system then puts pressure on the metabolic system and says increase blood sugars. What are we seeing? Aren't we seeing a lot of issues with, why has it gone from my head, the sugar disease? Oh, diabetes. Are we not seeing lots of issues with childhood diabetes? Yeah? That's because the stress has been increased for such a long time. Remember the dose effect? Yes? That now it's come through into their blood and it stayed there. It's an illness now, a physical illness. Okay, after the blood sugars, yes, then the immune system goes on high alert. Autoimmune diseases are on the increase? Yes? Immune system is on high alert. Inflammation is rife. Issues of pain that's the doctors are trying to check. I can't give you a diagnosis for this pain. I've had a diagnosis for fibromyalgia, maybe because I put too much stress on myself, maybe because of dyslexia, maybe because of the bullying that I had as a child. And so I had this condition. I've worked with it. I've, alhamdulillah, managed to reduce the inflammation. But I'm telling you, this happens through stress. Okay? So, inflammation. And why? Also, because it thinks there's going to be a physical wound. The body thinks it's on high alert. If there's a wound, we need to heal it. Okay? And so, think about all the sexual abuse that we've talked about, all the physical abuse that we've talked about. How is their body just in overdrive right now? Yes? And then the endocrine system releasing further hormones into the bloodstream that goes back up to the brain, and the cycle continues. We are seeing high levels of cardiovascular disease. It's not just down to diet, it's down to stress. But it's looking at the stress on the body and the brain from childhood till now is impacting us in our cardiovascular diseases that we're experiencing, in our inflammation diseases that we are experiencing. Sometimes when people have anxiety or just feeling depressed, you will see they might have the shakes. But when they go to the doctors to check, is it Parkinson's? Is it starting of dementia? No. Neurologically, I don't see anything. This is your body that's tired and it's had enough. And so I say today, enough is enough. We don't need to be in this pain anymore. As an individual, as a community, as a society at large, we must stop today. We must stop. And we've had enough information that shows us that we must stop. So inshallah, from today onwards, we're going to make a niyyah today. From today, this stops. In our homes, in our communities, in our societies. Wassalam.
Can we change that to a loud salawat, please? Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Thank you very much, Sister Farzana. That was heartfelt. You just know when there are people who have been touched by these things, and it just comes out, isn't it? We saw that yesterday in some of the sessions. We're seeing it today again. So thank you very much. That is the end of our first two sessions. We will take a break. It is now. Okay, questions are already coming in. We'll store them. We'll store them for the Q&A session. So we will take a brief break. This break is going to be 10 minutes long. It is now 10:35. So by 10:45, we will reconvene for our third session, followed by a Q&A. So ladies and gentlemen, please refresh yourselves, stand up, stretch a little bit, drink your tea. In 10 minutes, we will reconvene.